Okay, this is a very special episode.
I absolutely love this episode. So we had Yaling come on from Follow the One. One? Oh God, my pronunciation is terrible. But anyway,
Yaling was amazing.
Yaling is amazing. She talks about China and she's been writing her letter actually in the format of good thinking, so super flattering. And she came on to talk about all the things that you need to know about China, like for right now, like today. So she's always doing this on a regular basis. But if you want to understand this market, like from a high level and from a low level in all of the categories, this is the episode for you.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of really specific takeaways specific to China, but I think just also like a larger cultural awareness that I took away, certainly.
Yeah. It's a really good one. Let us know.
Enjoy.
Hey everyone, it's Chris.
And Kirsten.
Welcome to Good Thinking Weekly, the podcast where we discuss the best of the best in brands, marketing, and culture.
Thousands of people, top execs from the likes of Complex, Klaviyo, Walmart, Wall Street Journal, and LVMH tune in every single week.
We run a creative consultancy in GoodCo, so we know what it takes to build a good brand.
Subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's dive in.
All right, welcome to Good Thinking.
Hello.
Hi.
Yaling, tell us, how are you doing? How are things? You're sweating in London.
Good.
Yes.
I think you can say that. But I'm also working at a co-working space, which is equipped with AC, thankfully. But it's been a very unusually hot summer for London.
Yeah, I mean, global warming is sort of working in London's favor, I think. Like, of all the places, it's benefiting the most.
Yes, it's real. It's real. So a very special Good Thinking episode today.
Yes, I'm excited about it. So Yaling has written now 2, I guess this will be the second, letters in the good thinking style, which is an enormous compliment. I felt like every single time I read your newsletter, I'm like, yes, people need to understand China more. This market is not just affecting the West, but it's like it's informing everything. Like it's not just influencing, but I think it's really transforming things. And when you understand what you're doing, like, and what you're writing about, I think it's really, really interesting. So I'm excited to talk about everything that you want to talk about, from culture, food and bev, drugs and booze, which I know is not a Chinese specialty, maybe, or at least drugs portion. So yeah, I think it's going to be a fun conversation. And I really appreciate you actually writing the whole letter, which is just, thank you.
Yeah. Should we start out with an introduction? Yaling, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Yaling Jiang. In Chinese, I would say Jiang usually represents a fictional character, Jiang Ziya, and he has a whole cartoon IP behind him. But I think when I introduce myself in English, I would normally skip my surname. But if people ask, I'll say that Jiang means ginger in Chinese. So that's my name. And I've been covering trends for a long time, having been jumping from a career in translation to a career in journalism and now doing research. I like to say, I think there's definitely a commonality that connects all 3 sections of my career. That is information and just explaining China to an English-speaking audience. So I think the reason why Chris and I connected was that we were both giant trend nerds, and it's really hard to find people who are as into trends as we are. So I really appreciate how I'm seen by you, and also see you, Chris and Kirsten.
Love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the admiration is definitely a 2-way street. And every time I read something from you, I'm like, yes, exactly. Like this is so much how I think. So I'm excited to kind of chat. So shall we dive into the letter and like talk about it?
Let's dive in. I think I want to start by saying that I think a lot of people think China as a monolith, as this far, like just wild place in the East. But thanks to people like Chris, and also I think I see an emerging group of young journalists who can just see China as it is. I think that's what we need today, especially as China is getting more popular on a global stage. And according to a very recent Pew research, China is actually now more in favor than the US. by the participants. So I think there's a long way for people to actually know China for what it is. But I think trends is very good start because in the commercial context, you can see how similar the consumers are. So the first thing I want to talk about is Tomorrowland. I have not been to Tomorrowland personally. Have you? Personally? Okay.
I live in rural Italy, so I don't go to many things. As much as I sound like I know what I'm talking about, I mostly view it from the internet.
But it's very close to you. I just know that it's a music festival celebrated by fans of electronic music, and I would love to go personally. And I have done a project for Louvre before, which is the single official partner with Tomorrowland. So right after I see the news, I see that it can be a huge opportunity for brands that are already in collaboration with Tomorrowland in Europe. But the format in how they're going to bring it to China slightly concerns me because Tomorrowland, as we know, is a crazy music festival. People go there for days, people enjoy themselves, maybe with some use of drug, and they like to have a good time. So I can have a good time. But in China, it will be brought by, I think, the official organizer and also esports company, Hero Esports, and the local entertainment venue, Insland. So Insland is a building in Shanghai's Fuxing Park, which is central Shanghai. And they're known for being the host of multiple bars and clubs. So if you go to Insland, it means that you are bound to have a great night, jumping from one spot to another. And I think after seeing all those collaborators, I just think, oh, maybe it can just be a club night. And I don't know if that's what Tomorrowland has envisioned for themselves, but I think that's what it's going to be in China.
Is that because you think that in China, like, a festival doesn't work? Like, why do you think it needs to be like in all these little, I mean, actually, like thinking of a festival in the thought of like having it in all these small venues actually sounds amazing. But why do you think that has to be that way?
It doesn't have to be that way, but having read that they've already decided on the location, which is by the Bund, and it's going to be indoors. I just can't help but put myself into, I mean, as someone in that potential project, and I know that like esports wants to play a part in there, and Insland wants to play a part in there. So I can just imagine having giant screens, maybe feature the content from an esports company, and also Insland maybe bring their in-house DJs and connect with like local events producers. I think that's how it's going to turn out. Also, drugs are totally banned in China. We have very harsh punishment. So I think people go there will have a few maybe like themed cocktails. I can totally see themed cocktails designed by Tomorrowland, maybe with input from Insland. But I think that's about it. And it's going to blow up on social for sure. Yes.
Are there any current festivals in China? Like, is there a Glastonbury? Is there a Coachella? Like, is that a thing that's happening? And this is just being done in a different way?
I think the longest running music festival in China is called Strawberry Festival. And you can even tell by the name that I think it's very vanilla. It's very wholesome. And it's a mix. I think at the time I went, it was a mix of electronic and indie rock music. But even on the side, I think there's censorship going on in terms of what songs the artist can sing and even what kind of flags you can hoist as a member of the audience. So anything that supports Palestine or Israel or basically anything political and anything that's pro-LGBTQ, I've seen news stories of those flags being taken down and maybe like the members of the audience being kicked out.
Wow.
Start happening in the US, so maybe
Wow.
maybe it's not so far off.
Not.
I have a question though. Like in the US, like so much of like what makes like Coachella tick is like all these brand activations that kind of happening on the outside, right? Like brands have houses, they have parties, they have all these things. Is that happening, or are brands sort of just there if they're sponsors?
I think the commercial nature in China is a lot more concentrated, and people are very much used to that. Even when I was in a festival in Thailand called Wonder Fruit, I was surprised by how low the commercial participation is. I think in China, people are very used to seeing sponsored content and also brands giving, not just giving freebies, but also doing activities, running activities within the context of music festivals. So I think there will be a lot more brands, not just in entertainment or in lifestyle sector, but maybe brands from EV or from, I don't know, anything can go there, basically. Even real estate, if they're trying to sell real estate, they can go there. I think Chinese promoters.
B2B is alive and well at the festivals of China. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds quite appealing actually. Tomorrowland themed real estate project. It's like W.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's
be
a whole
interesting.
other conversation around like how brands, I do think that's something I've noticed, but we can talk about it another day. But like brands, so in the US, it's like, oh, it's a food and beverage brand, it's a retail brand. Like that's basically the only brands that like will come to anything. You know, like
Yeah.
you wouldn't come and be like, oh, I'm like an electric brand, or I'm like a retail, like, I'm building a building on the floor of this building. Like you're not going to show up at a Coachella. And I think that's so different in Asia, like in general, like the brands that we have brands like tech brands, but they don't participate in the same way, right? Like they're not coming and like showing up and having fun. They'll be there on the banner, but that's about it.
Exactly. I think that's very self-aware of those tech brands. In China, I think the principle is if you have money, you can participate. We don't really care if you are a good cultural fit. And also another thing I realized about China, especially in the trade show context, that trade show outside China, especially in Europe, are very B2B. They are not used to dealing with a consumer audience. But in China, it's really a mix. Exhibitors, brands there are very used to like talking to consumers as well as their peers. So even when you go to trade shows, it's a whole different experience. And I highly recommend you both to go to maybe like a food beverage trade show or like adult industry trade show in China. It's a whole different experience because the trade shows are also designed to attract consumers. So they will play with elements that are very popular in retail and store design.
That would be
That's
fascinating
fun.
to see.
Yeah.
I think that's something
Those
that
shows are very
is happening
interesting.
here. Yeah, that would be great. So maybe we're going to do a trip to Tomorrowland and then also do a food show. So we should line that up.
Because that's also showing up slowly in the West. Like I would say, like there's like the big food and beverage, like me and names, Kirsten.
Expo West.
Yes,
Yeah.
Expo West. There you go. Thank you. And that's starting to happen where consumers, but it's like a trickle, right? Like it's more that more industry folks are coming, like more outside of the food and beverage, but they're not. It's still industry people. It's not like it's not average consumer people. Like your daughter is not going to Expo West. Maybe. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's a good segue to the next one, and I won't even butcher this, so introduce it, and then we can talk about it.
I'd love to talk about Louis Vuitton next. I think that can also be a spot if you're going to visit China this year. So I don't know if you come across any posts about it. I've been posting about it on Substack and LinkedIn. So Louis Vuitton launched its multi-purpose space in Shanghai that looks like a
boat.
Yeah,
it does.
It's one of the kind in the world. Although they've done, I think, similar concept. For example, I don't know, a store that looks like a truck in other cities. A store that looks like a ship. It's very first one. So people are flocking there to take pictures. And I think one interesting conversation I've observed is not only about Louis Vuitton itself, but also about something in a brand that seems irrelevant. That's Starbucks. Because where Louis Vuitton docked its ship is right next to Starbucks' largest China store, Starbucks Reserve Roastery. That is, I think it's also at least 2 floor or 3 floor. And consumers in Shanghai especially are posting about how it is bad feng shui for Starbucks because they have a ship facing the front.
So it's because it's a ship that it's bad, or just because it's a building?
I think it's about how the front of the ship is facing the Starbucks store.
So it's the whole concept is bag feng shui, like
It's-
not
So it's like
even
a-
just the wow.
Wow.
And so how is that going down? Like, are people avoiding it? Like, what does it mean? What is Starbucks doing? Like,
I think it's really good for both of them because people can naturally go to Starbucks to look at the ship and also post about feng shui and join the conversations on social media. I think it's a brilliant idea, but
did
I
you think they did it
Starbucks-
on purpose?
I'm not sure. I think Starbucks definitely knew from their landlord or developer, like,
Okay.
but
So
there's nothing they can do about it.
this is amazing. So this is like true disruption. It's disruption of the feng shui that you would think people would be kind of up in arms about, but you think it's a positive thing for both brands and people are actually excited about it because they're just talking about it?
I think so. Yeah. So people,
Wow.
because there will be a lot of people visiting Louis Vuitton's ship, and it's like having two tourist attractions in retail at the same spot. It's really good for Chinese consumers who just want to take pictures, and they can actually post about both stores instead of just going to one of them and having to travel to another place. And I think I'm very pleasantly surprised by how Starbucks reacts to this. So on RedNote, which is of, I think, TikTok fame as early this year, they made a post about finding solutions to counter bad feng shui. They're like, do you have any way for us to counter this? Because we hear you. And there have been, I think, AIGC images of the ship being Titanic and the Starbucks being, I think, an iceberg or something.
Wow.
So that has garnered very good traffic for the post, and also it shows that Starbucks is being very relevant and hears people.
Yeah, because you've written about how Starbucks has been a little bit slow in general. Like you've not been like so Starbucks positive in your newsletter. I mean, I think you and I both like Starbucks, and I have a love for Starbucks, but also have a penchant for like being harsh on Starbucks because I think they know better. But tell me about all of that. But also, do you think it's working? Like, has anyone come in and said, here's the solution? And like Starbucks is like they've, put a new door in, or like, I don't know how you do feng shui, but I know that mirrors and doors are really important.
I don't think they care much after that post, to be honest. And I think
They haven't changed anything.
where their head
Wow.
is at, because Starbucks China is really facing a lot of struggles business-wise. A lot of domestic players are catching up or surpassing their sales and store numbers, and they are still very slow in terms of product innovation and also matching the price. So I think, yeah, they're worried about other things, not just bad feng
Right.
shui.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like
So
they
not
have a
to,
sense of humor about it. Is it
Yeah.
doing anything for the Louis Vuitton brand?
I think Louis Vuitton is just Louis Vuitton. I think people are gonna like them no matter what.
Feng shui, no feng shui.
Yeah, exactly. One can argue it's losing favor among middle class consumers, because I think that's a very key trend I'm seeing in China luxury after COVID. The middle class consumers just realized that. I mean, I consider myself one of them. We are not the core audience. We have to worry about other things, like, I don't know, supporting our children to through education. Not that I have children, but I'm kind of like speaking on behalf of Chinese middle class consumers, and thinking about the bonus we've lost if we work in finance. Thinking about our mortgage when our real estate investment is losing value. So we really don't have any spare money to spend on luxury bags anymore. It's definitely not like 10 years ago where everyone wants a piece of luxury item just to show that we have status and we are confident in the future, because every tomorrow is better than yesterday. I think that's what China's economic consumption upgrade feels like. But now things are very different. I think middle class consumers don't really care about Louis Vuitton unless it's something that within their spending range, they can probably still afford to have their chocolate or go to the restaurant or take pictures, go to the exhibitions. But I think very few of them are thinking about actually purchase Louis Vuitton.
And are they purchasing Chinese luxury goods, which I've read are kind of taking off, or are they just foregoing the whole thing entirely?
Chinese luxury, I have my doubts about that. There are definitely brands that are calling them Chinese luxury, including this jewelry brand Laopu Gold. But I'm very doubtful as to whether they can sustain themselves as a luxury brand, because I think they may be very expensive, but they are a publicly listed company and they are a family business. So my concern is, instead of long-term brand building, they're only going to care about stock price and maximize profits for the family.
Those are very different
Interesting.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me like I'm no like financial expert nor an expert in China, but it feels like the market is just maturing, right? Like it's sort of like the same thing that's happened in the US. Like the tastes evolve, like the market shifts, like the whole thing is just, it's kind of following a very similar trajectory to the West. Like it's just later, but it's similar.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was looking at the next item, didn't quite catch the last thing you said.
No. Don't worry. Let's carry on, because honestly,
Okay.
there's so many things in here. Like, I really want to talk about the Hyrox milestone. I want to talk about the teens. Like, there's so many people in here that I like so many things.
Okay, cool. I think, Kirsten, I want to ask you about drugs and booze, and maybe booze and beverage in particular.
Okay. Ask
What
away.
have you been drinking, and what do you think are like the popular drinks among consumers in the US in terms of booze?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that we're experiencing here for sure is kind of the non-alcoholic, thing that's happening as far as non-alcoholic options being on literally every menu, being in every store, being a thing that's completely accepted and kind of celebrated. So it's not always having to go out and necessarily get a drink that has alcohol in it. You can go out and get a drink that has non-alcohol. To me, that's kind of the biggest thing that we're seeing across the board.
What are some of your go-to drinks?
I mean, I like adding spritz to anything to kind of like lower it. I mean, I think there's Gaia and all of the kind of the more, iconic things that we've had here for a while. But I also like, delicious sparkling water that's just like done up just right. Like I think it's just kind of the alternatives in general.
Has that taken off in China, do you think? Or was low ABV and like non-alcoholic like kind of always a thing?
I think, we have a very different drinking culture to begin with, especially now that I'm in the UK. I see a drastic difference in terms of drinking culture. I think, first of all, in the UK, White Claw is still a new thing.
Welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Welcome to the West. You're well indoctrinated now. Yes.
Yeah. And also, I'm not sure if the same as the examples you said, but I think 0% beer, people are very in favor of, which is also very British. I think even in terms of non-alcoholic drinks, it can be very British. Whereas in China, I think the drinking usually takes place. Drinking is not seen as a social sport. It's seen as one of the options. So people would like to go to cafes. Yeah, usually just cafes instead of pubs. And sometimes I think before we go out, for example, before I go out to this Tomorrowland event that's taking place this year, I might just head up the convenience store with my friends and we mix our own cocktails within the store, because we usually have these large Japanese convenience store chains and they have a really good mix of, I think, just mixers, and they also sell liquor. So in economic downturn,
and you're just literally like pouring booze and drinks in the store? Like, or is it like a machine?
Oh, great question. Sorry for not making that clear.
The picture in my head is amazing.
Yeah.
We basically buy drinks individually. For example, there's also, I think, flavored sparkling water section these days, and also large coconut water, coconut milk section. And then separately, we have a hard liquor section with Western liquor and Chinese spirits. So we buy a bunch of them. And we also buy an ice cube cup in the frozen section. So it's just like plastic cup with ice cubes in it. I think it's a Korean thing. And
this sounds amazing.
I know, it will mix everything together. We can even ask the shop assistant to pull up an espresso shot if we want, because there's also coffee machines.
So you're mixing your own espresso martinis, like over ice in the store. Like,
If we did that in a convenience store here, the clerk at
You'd be
7-Eleven would
arrested.
look at us like we were crazy. That's amazing. I love that.
Is yes.
and so that's on one end of the spectrum. And what is the like sort of the luxury like market for booze in China? Like, is it you're buying like really well-known brands, like you're buying super nice champagne, or like what are you kind of doing in that space?
I think what people are doing is they're trying to mix traditional Chinese medicine, like the ingredients that do not only serve a medicinal purpose, but also can be eaten as food. They're trying to do a mix with their drinks because it really speaks to, I think it resonates with a larger wellness movement, but with a Chinese twist. And it also speaks to the larger food and beverage trend. So not only the booze producers are doing this, but also food producers, beverage producers are doing the same thing. So I think it's happening later in booze. I think they only saw how it's become a success in food and beverage, so that now people want to also consume it in alcohol form.
Amazing. Yeah, you posted something about like some like I reposted it, some like interesting like teas and some interesting coffee like the coffee trends in China are really like fascinating. And so you're thinking that that's coming into like, are we going to get like a pear something spritz like coming out of China or no?
Oh, I see what you mean. I think I do remember that particular flavor you liked. I didn't even
waiting for
have
it.
that. I haven't tried that flavor because that fruit is a prickly pear. Yes, prickly pear fruit is very regional. I think it's only produced in maybe a small area in southern China. But what I love about this trend, which I think is also one of the consequences of COVID, that people are getting inspirations from within the border. People only traveled within the border for 3 years. Now they're taking all these regional inspirations and incorporate with large city products. And that's why we are seeing prickly pear Americano.
I love that though. So basically, because no one could travel outside of China, everybody became inspired by Chinese flavors, and now the like regional Chinese flavors are becoming national inspiration.
I think that's my take. Of course, we can also not forget the government's role in this. The government really want Chinese people to be proud of their own culture and their own products. So there's definitely a policy push behind these traditional Chinese medicine ingredients, as well as China's cultural confidence. The president wanted the young people, not just young people, but everyone to be culturally confident in China and spend on Chinese goods.
I mean, I can see that definitely. We have functional beverages, a little bit in alcohol, like with CBD, and certainly just in drinks in general. But I could see traditional Chinese medicine in alcoholic drinks, but also in non-alcoholic drinks doing very well here for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I would buy them.
I think you are probably maybe one of the earliest consumers who will see that in America, because I think first of all, a lot of Chinese beverage brands are seeking to explore overseas markets. And one of the first stops is San Francisco or LA, because they have a large Chinese population there. And these brands believe that will be more receptive to Chinese brands and Chinese influences.
I love that.
Yeah. Excited
Can we
to see.
talk about the Hyrox competition? I've written about Hyrox a few times, and I feel like I had no idea that it was franchised and affiliated. Like, I didn't know that that's how they were growing with gyms. Like, maybe that's happening everywhere, and I just completely missed that. Like, I only picked up on the big tournaments. I didn't pick up on like sort of gyms being affiliated with it.
Yeah, me either. So apparently, Hyrox has reached a milestone in China. It now has more than 100 affiliated gyms in mainland China across 23 cities. And that means the gym members can go there and have Hyrox specific programs. They can train for Hyrox there, and they can also get a discount for the Hyrox Beijing stop.
So tell me about the like workout. I mean, obviously, I'm very keenly aware of Kirsten's LA workout scene, and the lack of a workout scene in Europe that is totally, but like everybody in Europe works out, I would say, but they just don't consider it working out, right? Like in my world, like everybody hikes. It's like you don't know anyone that doesn't hike. So what is that like in China, and how could brands tap into that?
Workout, I would say workout and fitness and sports in general are quite new. It's a new lifestyle to Chinese consumers. I don't think it has picked up until early 2000s. That's when chain gyms started opening across China. And that happened for a reason, I think, because China has been, I wouldn't call it a very stable society, and there have been a lot of political disturbances over the last few decades. So right after each political disturbance, I would say people are very focused on just make a living and make sure their families are fed. And it wasn't until China joined the WTO, and after I think the consumption market has really started flourishing, that people find themselves wanting to spend their disposable income elsewhere. So in the early 2000s, we saw a lot of gyms opening, and I think in 2010s, there have been a lot more specialized gyms and studios, and yoga is one of them that has taken off then. And more recently, because of China's central push, and also because a lot of brands have entered China, bringing this new lifestyle into China, and under the context that Chinese people have turned to sports a lot and sports communities a lot during COVID. So now we are seeing like the whole sports sector flourishing. And I would say it's actually the highest growth sector in China.
Wow.
That's exciting.
It's fascinating that it's coming from kind of a consumption level, that it's actually being there and people are realizing that they want to do it, versus kind of coming from they're doing this activity. And so brands are realizing they've got to create these gyms or what have you to answer that need.
Yeah, I think when it comes to when it comes to brands and what they can do, I think for sports brands like Nike, there is really a good opportunity to tap into smaller and niche brands. I recently saw Nike is sponsoring a trail run in Chongli, which is northern China. I think that's a great way to open yourself up to a new audience who are now finding themselves wanting to try niche sports, because I know that, I think everyone knows that Nike isn't doing particularly well. It's losing its appeal with younger audience and also with a general audience.
Yeah. You've heard a bunch about just today about like all these different brands coming in, like Western brands, but also Chinese brands. And are there any, I feel like there's a lot of homegrown Chinese brands that are really like coming into like major play, right? Like not just in China, but globally, like obviously in the tea market. But then are there any sports brands that you feel like are coming out of China right now where you're like, oh, like not only is this interesting in China, but like Nike better watch out in the West too? I mean, Nike needs to watch out no matter what, but like, On or anyone else.
I'm not super sure, actually. I think a lot of them have great potential, but it's also a huge problem when they don't know how they can market themselves. For example, one of my favorite, I think, as leisure brand in China is called Ankoro. It's hard to pronounce.
Okay.
I forgot what it means. It belongs to a larger fashion group, and they've done particularly well in speaking to the, I think, golf court aesthetics, and people wear their stuff to do all kinds of sports. I think their stuff looks really great. But first of all, I don't know if they have the ambition to go global or to certain key cities. And also, I don't think their communications is that strong. And I don't think their marketing is that strong. Maybe that's something that you both can help.
Yeah.
We're here
Contact
for
us.
Yes.
We'll help you out.
Let us know. We're here to talk about it. All right. We only have 5 more minutes. So do you want to talk about another segment? You had a whole fun for the week. Is there anyone that you wanted to kind of all the fun for the week? What I loved about what you did was you took influencers or people that you think are worth following in China, or like Chinese adjacent, like Chinese people who are living internationally. Is there anyone here who you're just like, if you're not following this person, you're missing out?
Before I dive into that, I want to ask you both, what's your impression of Chinese brands and Chinese influencers on Western social media? And who are the people you are following?
I mean,
Kirsten
no one
only
comes to mind for
follows
me. Yeah.
only follows the brands that target her. So if you're not targeting Kirsten, like
Yeah.
there's an open opportunity for you to target literally the
I'm a
most
very
targeted
specific
person.
niche. I'm a
I
very
see.
specific niche.
Yeah.
My algorithm's real specific.
I would
But
say
Chris?
that I mostly follow Chinese media and Chinese brands on Substack. I don't follow that many people on Instagram or TikTok. And I feel like actually what I loved about what you shared was that it felt like it really opened that world to me, because I don't get served that. Like I'm not given that in terms of like what I'm seeing. And that would be like, to me, the biggest thing is like, why aren't I seeing these things?
Okay, I'm so happy.
Who should we be following?
Yes, everyone on this upcoming newsletter, basically. I also want to make it clear that if you want the best Chinese influencer content, you should really go to Chinese platforms such as RedNote. I think that's a low barrier of entry, right? These days, a lot of people also have RedNote.
People have RedNote. I think that it does function really differently. And that's why I feel like when it was like, oh, RedNote's taking over TikTok, right? It was like, it was a very short blip of things. Like it just functions differently, and it takes time for people to like re-figure themselves out in terms of how the culture of like the app works and how things like function and who to follow and how to find and how to make your feed interesting, right? Like for me, it was just like you get on there and you're like, I don't know, like it feels like you're a little bit lost, and that's sad, quite honestly, because like you're missing out on this whole all the Chinese Substacks that I follow, like they're always like linked to RedNote, and then I'm like following along but kind of not following along, and it feels like it's not really like made for Western consumption, which isn't bad. It's just a deficit on my side.
I see what you mean. I think that's so important for RedNote to hear. But and I also wish to see more Western consumers, not just consumers. What I'm talking about, well, just like people from all over the world on Chinese apps. So I want to talk a little bit about where I got the inspirations for this section. So a lot of these are designers. A lot of them run designs. For example, Samuel Guiyang, Fabricorn, Angus Kyung, and the reason why I first knew about them is because I covered fashion for Jing Daily for I think a year. And I saw this as my main responsibility to befriend these designers and also just keep track of what's popping and who goes to which Chinese brand have attended Fashion Week. So that's how I first knew about them. And so great to see brands such as like Samuel and also Feng taking off, not just in China, but also on the global stage. And the rest, I think the rest of them, I think are a mixture of just Chinese people in creative field. So one of them is like a tattoo artist. Sorry, when I say China, I mean Greater China, not just mainland China. I think it's very important to make that clear because there's also Taiwanese creatives here. So yeah, Dai Gai Fan is a food blogger who originally from Hong Kong and now based in London. And it's Yu is a fashion grad who imitates British, just British people in general. And
I love that.
I loved her imitation of not just a British accent, but also like a British granny accent. It's immaculate.
That's great.
I love that.
This is a great list. I'm for sure following to open up my algorithm for sure.
I'm
And
so glad.
Yeah.
And there are also artists who I follow now because I want to buy their art later when I can afford.
I love that. That's half of what I follow on Instagram, so I can really relate. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming and not just educating us, but like bringing us on the journey and like showing us that like, I think it's just like everything has been so interesting, but like you've been so open about it, and I really appreciate it. You make it very approachable. And if you're not super informed, I think one of the best things about it is like this is the entryway. Like you need to be informed. You're the entryway to that, and you make it so easy to do that and not feel like an idiot. So that I love. So
I'm
Yes.
so happy. I'm so
Yeah.
happy. Thank you. Maybe I can
Yeah.
change my tagline.
You
Yeah.
absolutely should, because
please,
but you
how
should.
to
I mean,
not
it's
feel
really
like
well
an idiot
said.
about China.
But it's really well said. But you're sharing ideas with us, and you're sharing people, and you're sharing resources, but you're also sharing culture, and that's a really beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and hard to do, and you do it really humbly and in a really accessible way. So thank you.
Thank you both.
Thanks, guys.
We really enjoyed talking.
Great conversation. Yaling's amazing and a rad human.
First of all, I love her so much. Like the most like vulnerable person that you'll ever meet. Like we've had drinks in London, and like she'll just tell you her whole life. Like, and I love
Yeah.
that about her. Like she's just really a human being that you just want to spend time with. But what I
100%.
love most about this conversation, and I said this at the end, is like I feel like it's pretty obvious, and I never want to be that person who's like, oh, I understand this when I don't really understand it. You know, like I really get the Western market. Like I can tell you the difference between a Texas consumer and a Chicago consumer and a New York consumer, and like I can just tell you the whole spiel, and I feel
Right.
comfortable in that way about Europe. And I did grow up in Asia,
Right.
but I don't feel the comfort with like understanding the consumer as much, and the marketplace. And I think she makes it really approachable, and she really like provides like a very easy way to understand like the whole market, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Yes. I think it's very approachable and very understandable. And I understand very little, but I thought there were some really great takeaways as far as like seeing what happens when, China's bringing this Tomorrowland and bringing a kind of this community and this festival, which is all about kind of freedom and openness and things like that, and seeing how it's going to come into China. And I thought her her kind of awareness around it and insights was really valuable and really interesting. And I think the conversation that you and I had afterwards, as far as really, we do all think about it like, oh, well, if our brand is going into China, or somebody's going to help to, help you get into China, or kind of this overall kind of large, area that suddenly your brand will be able to interpret as it would, Europe, or as it would Texas, is a much, much different thing versus like it's all of these different areas. And just like in the US, just like in Europe, they're all very unique. Like, I think that's a really valuable insight that you had that we were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, China's huge, absolutely enormous.
Yes.
And then there's outer China, like Hong Kong, Taiwan, like and then obviously the whole Asia market. But I think there's still, unless you're working in it, like, and you're like, oh, you're really embedded, I think there's still this belief that it's a monolith, and that like, that it's this one culture. And that's not true of Gen Z. It's not true of alphas. It's not true of the US. It's certainly not true of Europe. Like, and you would never assume so, although many brands assume that Gen Z is still a monolith. Please stop. And I think that the conversation that we had is just like, that is crazy. One thing that I also really enjoyed is that I think for a long time, actually, Chinese consumers didn't really look within China, right? Like they were looking to other markets for inspiration, and then or for desire, maybe not inspiration, but like, oh, like this is happening here, and then we want that here in that same form. And now within China, because of how things were with maybe COVID, but also I think actually culturally, like there's a huge, from what I've read, is like there's just an appreciation growing for like what is actually happening. And I think that's beyond just the government's like propaganda. Like I think that there is also, there's maybe that.
Yes,
yes. And much like in the US, just because you're like, oh, like America made is amazing, like it doesn't mean that the rest of us are like, oh yes, America made is amazing. I think what actually is happening is that saying like, oh, just because it's Europe made, and you actually now know that like a lot of European made things are not really made in Europe, and a lot of US things are not really made in, like there's just a greater global understanding of consumers understanding that like quality is quality. It doesn't necessarily matter where it's coming from, and you can kind of like draw on your own quality things from your own like culture, and you can draw on quality things from other cultures. And I think that is happening in China, and I love the stuff that Yaling has been posting about, like prickly pear and all these things, like these are very obviously kind of like, it's like Japan and matcha, right? Like you're like, oh, okay, like it's there's a lot more to it than that, but it is really interesting. And I do think that there's a lot for brands to play with, like Western brands and Chinese brands alike, to like pull on these things that people are suddenly realizing that they appreciate, and they didn't really appreciate them before. It was just kind of true, but it wasn't like celebrated.
Right. It wasn't pointed out. Yeah. And I think her list of resources of who to follow and just really kind of expanding your cultural zeitgeist, I think is amazing and definitely something I'm going to follow. And I loved really, the understanding that humor really is universal, and the feng shui situation going on with Louis Vuitton incident, feng shui gate, whatever we might be calling it, with Louis Vuitton and Starbucks. I love the fact that, Starbucks is really leaning in and showing personality in China, and people are really responding in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think that's happening globally, right? Like if you
For sure.
are like, there's a bunch of brands recently, I can't think of the names because, that's the episode of this
It's a thing.
show. But like, it's like brands where they're like, oh, the pump doesn't work, right? And they show the pump and then like the product like
right. That was a great campaign. Yeah.
They really like acknowledge it. And I think that the more, generally speaking, like I think the more that brands kind of like can own what's happening to them, or what's like they've done wrong, or what's happening in culture, like not from a like, oh, like we're participating and everybody loves Labubu's, like not that, but like it's, more like really like owning where you are. I think it's the better it gets.
Yes. And I think that's for sure universal. We've both talked and posted a lot about that. Brands really leaning into their vulnerability, and really, realness. That's what we want to see in people, and that's what we want to see in brands. And it's so great to see happening in China as well. And why shouldn't it? It's clearly universal.
Yeah. And then the very last thing that I thought was really fascinating to me was the whole sport conversation. Like Yaling has posted a lot about how China has actually invested, like the government has invested in like outdoorism and like kind of getting people out into hiking and all these things. She didn't bring that up in the podcast, but like yoga taking off, and obviously we could go whole like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and like like everybody like self-actualizing and like blah blah blah. Right. But like I think that it's just a really fascinating. I think it's happening in France too. Like sport and the understanding of like health. Before, I think there was this belief that you were thin and you were this, and like it was just like, oh, you were naturally like healthy and we eat healthy and all. And I think actually in the West, now it's like, oh, we actually have to eat healthy and not just work out. So there's maybe a merging of all the things, but I think it's really interesting. Like in France, there's a lot going on with sport. In Asia, there's a lot going on with sport. Like sport is really probably the most culturally, I mean, this is not news to anyone listening, but like, it really is like the most culturally interesting place you could be right now.
100%. I was telling you the conversation I was having earlier about sport. With somebody, as far as kind of this large, how do you bring this into, it's already in the zeitgeist, how do you really bring it into being kind of as an ongoing basis? And I think you're absolutely right. And sport being, kind of the Nikes, the Formula Ones, kind of all the things that we're seeing, the WNBAs, but sport also being, your personal workout, your personal, whatever that thing is to you, wellness. I think it's for sure the largest conversation. It was fascinating to hear it's happening and how it's developing in China, because it is very different than how it's happened in, the US.
Yeah. And I think it's happening at a faster pace, right? Because in the US, it was like kind of like this slow burn, maybe over 20 years. It was like we were doing these things, and here it's like the inflection curve is like this, right? Like it's really happening. Like they're already at Hyrox. Like it took us a long time to get to Hyrox.
But it's happening because the opposite way, right? In the States, certainly it happened because people wanted to be active, and they were being active, and they were doing all these things. And then places said, oh, we should create a space for these people to be active. Let's create gyms. Let's create Nautilus. Let's create yoga studios. Let's create all of this. And it sounds like what's happening in China is kind of the opposite. They're like, well, we should have gyms. We should promote people to work out and go on hikes and kind of do these types of things. They're creating the thing, and then they're coming to it.
Yeah, but it's happening at a really fast pace. It's super interesting. And I think it's a massive opportunity for Chinese brands and maybe Western brands. Like Western brands, I think, generally speaking, haven't done really well. And like, I think it's really hard. And I think that they really like do have to adapt. And one of the things that Yaling wrote about is like Sweaty Betty, for example, like got acquired by a Chinese brand, or their segment of the Chinese market got acquired, and like they're licensing it out. And I think that may be still like the way to go, because the cultural understanding needs to be there. Like it's just
Yes. Right.
Really, really difficult. But if you are thinking of doing that, I would say Yaling is the perfect person to work with. So, you know, like find people that really get it and like can translate the two worlds together. Is like, it's pretty rare.
Yeah. And she is clearly the expert.
Yeah.
All right. So let us know what you think. We would love to hear comments. Share it with somebody. Give it some algorithm.
Let us know what we don't know about the Chinese market, which obviously
because there's a lot.
Yeah, clearly novices coming to this space, but coming with a lot of enthusiasm. So let us know.
Yeah, enjoy.
That was it for this episode of Good Thinking. Don't forget to tune in next week.
If you found this valuable, subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.
And don't forget to read on Substack for even more insights.
And if you really liked it, drop us a heart. We'd love to hear from you.
Ciao. Until next time.